Hi everyone, welcome back. Today is my fourth declutter video in my makeup collection declutter that's going on right now. I've done about half of my makeup collection at this point, and today we're doing eyeshadow palettes. This one is, in my opinion, pretty ruthless. We do cut my palette collection in half, so be ready. I know this might shock some of you. I don't know, maybe it won't, but the reality is what I've noticed in the last year and a half is I'm not as into eyeshadow as I was at one time. My real love is complexion products. I love foundation, concealer, blush. Those are the things I love most. And I do like a good eyeshadow palette, but I like neutrals. I like very basic palettes, and some of what I have in my collection, there's nothing wrong with them. They're beautiful palettes, but the reality is I don't use them. And in terms of a palette collection, I want all of my palettes to be things that I love, because like I said, I don't use a ton of eyeshadow. So the things that I do have, I want to really love. But I just wanted to prepare you. I do get rid of quite a bit here, and some of them may surprise you. I'm really happy with the outcome. And actually, I've just filmed the next declutter video that you'll see, which is single shadows, mascara, brows, eyeliners, all those kinds of things. And after doing that, I was actually able to combine my eyeshadow palettes and that whole drawer into one drawer. So if that tells you anything, there you go. I hope you enjoy, and if you're new here, my name is Blair. I do all kinds of beauty content here on YouTube. I hope you'll subscribe if you haven't already, and let's get into the declutter. Okay, so this is what we're working with in terms of eyeshadow palettes. I just wanted to show you the before. So my eyeshadow palette collection is not like crazy big. It's a lot, obviously, but eyeshadow is not really my thing. I used to like it a little bit more at the start of my YouTube channel. Now I've gotten more into complexion. That's definitely what I love most, and that's my thing. So that will definitely be reflected in the outcome of this declutter, just because I'm going to be really ruthless here, and a lot of the things I get rid of I don't dislike, and I don't think they're bad, but I don't use them, and I know I'm not going to. So this one is definitely going to be more brutal than any of the other declutters, but most of these that I'm going to declutter, if they're in good shape, I will either donate or I will maybe sell some of them on Poshmark, because a few of these are definitely, there's nothing wrong with them. I could definitely resell them. So I think that's everything. But I wanted you to see a before, and let's get started. Let's get into it. We're going to do the same thing we've done with all my other declutters. I'm going to pick anything that I know I'm going to keep first, and then we'll move on. I will tell you that none of these I feel super confident in keeping. So that's not going to work for this first group, but that's how the majority of the declutter is going to go. But let's just start. I feel like once I start, this is going to be easier, but let's start with this palette. This is the True Beauty palette from BK Beauty. BK Beauty, I'm sure you know, is a very well-known at this point brush brand on YouTube and just social media in general. And one of their products back closer to when they first launched, they actually came out with an eyeshadow palette. This is the palette. This is their only eyeshadow palette that they've ever done. And this is a nice palette. It's neutral. You do get a little bit of like a pop of color with the purple right here. But this is a pretty neutral palette. It's not like a tip-top favorite for me. It's definitely pretty basic in terms of the formula, I would say. The metallics are very nice, very creamy metallic shades, but this is not a palette that I ever reach for, ever. And And I think in the past I've held on to it just because it's BK Beauty and I love and adore BK Beauty, but I just don't see myself using this or needing it in my collection. But the quality is pretty good on the palette. It's just not something that I need. So I will be decluttering that. All right, let's talk about this one. This is from MAC. This is the Unfiltered Nudes palette. This is one of the newer palettes from them that I forget, I guess it's been maybe like a year and a half, 2 years. They came out with a bunch of new pre-made palettes and this was one of them. And this is a gorgeous neutral palette. It has a few of the classic MAC shades like Satin Taupe, what is this one called? I can't ever remember it. Uninterrupted. It's like this yellowy brown. It has Wedge. It's a good palette. However, in the last like year and a half, I also have made my own MAC palettes. I have a 6-pan palette and a 4-pan palette that I picked the shades for. And I like those more than I like this. But is this a bad palette? No. Is it as good as some of the others that I'm going to keep? No, not in my opinion. It's average. And I would say that about MAC shadows in general. They're very iconic because, you know, so many people love MAC. It's just such an iconic brand. And they were known for so long for their eyeshadow palettes, or their eyeshadows, I should say. And, you know, they're good. But now there are so many great eyeshadow formulas, like just fantastic formulas. And this is just okay to me. And I prefer my smaller palettes that I personally made myself. So I am going to be decluttering that one. Let's talk about Tarte for a minute. Okay, so I have Tartelette in Bloom and Tarte Aspen Ovard. Okay, if you've been around my channel for a long time, I mention this in every single declutter, and I'm going to mention it again. This palette I always hang on to because, first of all, it's neutral. It's beautiful. In my opinion, this is one of the prettiest palettes Tarte has ever done. And when I was first getting into makeup, this was one of the palettes or one of the products that I went into Ulta one day. I still remember. I remember what Ulta it was. And I walked in and this was on the front table. And at the time, I didn't even know who Aspen Ovard was. But I was just getting into makeup and I was just starting to discover beauty content on YouTube. And I bought it and I loved it. This was like my first just absolute love in terms of a palette. I just loved it. And I can remember getting ready for work and wearing this every day. Like like this shade right here, or actually both of these shades. This one right here has a huge dip in it. I can't believe I haven't hit pan on these two because I used to wear these every single day. And oh, my favorite shade in here was this Endless Summer shade. This really pretty, just pretty standard gold shimmer. So every single declutter, I keep this just because I just can't bear to let it go, but we're gonna let it go because I have other things now that I love more than that, but I just wanted to share. Sentimental to me, but I think I can let that go now. And then, of course, Tartelette in Bloom. This was also one of my first palettes that I got. And again, this is a good palette. I kind of feel the same about the Tarte eyeshadow formula that I do about the MAC eyeshadow formula. They're good. They're not great. And you know, there's just so many other things now, so many other brands and formulas and palettes. These are just kind of mediocre now. But do I keep this or not? This is my favorite shade in this palette, which is Funny Girl, which is hilarious because it looks almost identical to the one from the other Tarte palette that I love so much. I think it's time. I think it's time. It's just not one of my favorites anymore. All right, moving into Charlotte Tilbury. This is the Beautyverse palette from last holiday. I still love the packaging on this. I just have to say, I think it's so pretty. But let's open this up. So this came out last holiday season. It has 3 really gorgeous mattes in here. These 3 on the top row here, fantastic formula. This is very similar to her what is it called? Gosh, now I can't remember it. The palette that I love, that's a tiny little like 6-pan palette. I can't think of it. We'll get to it eventually. But this formula is basically that palette, the formula in that palette, and it's fantastic. Like these 3 mattes, beautiful. And then you have this pink, which is a different formula. This is more of like a standard true flat matte. These have more of like a satin finish to them. And then you have a bunch of glitter toppers. I'm gonna declutter, guys. I'm gonna declutter. I actually don't dislike this palette. I thought it was decent. However, I think the standouts are definitely the 3 at the top, and you get that in that other small Charlotte Tilbury palette that I have that we'll get to in a minute. And I'm just not gonna use, like this blue, I'm not gonna use. The purples, I'm not gonna use. I might use these 2 glitter toppers right here. But again, I have another palette, or a few other palettes that have those types of shades and formulas that I like more. So that I will be decluttering. Last for this group, we have 2 from Nars. Nars. Let's talk about Nars eyeshadow for a minute. Nars eyeshadow is pretty good. I would say it's even better than good. It's not exceptional, but it's very good. But they discontinue everything. They discontinue every palette that they come out with. This was the Summer Unrated palette, I believe from 2 years ago. And then this is the Orgasm Rising palette from, was this last summer? I think this might have been last summer, I forget. But the Nars shadow formula is actually pretty good. So part of me wants to keep one of these. If I keep one, I'm going to keep this one, the smaller Orgasm Rising palette, because this is a pretty good size for like a travel palette. This palette I think is beautiful. I love the colors in here, but I never reach for this. This is never going to be like my top choice. It's just going to sit there and collect dust. And I know that. It's pretty to look at, but I feel that I can definitely let that go. This is the one I'm struggling with because I love the packaging. I love the size of it. I love like this really nice neutral matte brown right here. And like I said, the Nars formula is good, but like, for example, okay, that shade right there, I will never use that shade. I don't like pinky. That one almost has like a reddish tone to it. I think the formula is really nice, smooth, pretty like sheen to it, but I will never use that color. And I'm trying to get away from keeping palettes with colors that I won't use. Now there's an exception like here and there, but typically I don't want to keep palettes that I don't use every shade. So that one's gonna go too. I know, can you believe it? We've decluttered everything in group number 1. I don't think that's ever happened to me, ever. Let's get into Natasha Denona, and I also have the Danessa Myricks Groundwork palette back here. Let's start with the Groundwork palette because this is an easy one. This is definitely going. I wanted to love this, but this palette is just not for me. It's just not for me. And I've tried it so many times, but I do not like this. I cannot stand the smell. I don't ever use like this orange color right here. I would never ever use that. I have tried to use it for my brows, but I can't get like a really great color match for me with the brows. Like that's what all these little marks are in here, is me trying to use it for the brows. And in terms of using it on my face for sculpting, this was supposed to be like a multi-use palette. I don't know. It just wasn't for me. I've tried it so many times and this one was just not for me. So that is an easy declutter. Natasha Denona. Now, okay, this may this may shock you also, but okay, let's start with an easy one so I can just ease my way into this. This is the easiest keep, or one of the easiest keeps in this whole video. I would never, ever, 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 ever declutter this. The I Need a Nude palette. Every time I open this, it brings me joy. I love every single color in here. I love the formulas. I know that I can use this palette and I will love whatever I do with it. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what color. I adore this. So this is my first keep of the whole video. I am also going to keep the Yucca palette. The Yucca palette, for me, it's very bright. This is a lot more color than I would typically use on a day-to-day basis. But if I'm gonna go for color, this would be the palette I would choose because I love greens. And this is color, but it has some wearableness to it. Wearableness, and obviously everything is wearable, but for me, I can make this work even though I'm very much a neutral kind of girl. I can still make this work. This palette is just beautiful. I mean, I love these greens in here. I don't have anything else like it. Like those two on my fingers right there, absolutely beautiful. I'm not wild about this lime green over here, but everything else I really like. And this is so different from most other things that we see on the market. This color story, I really, really love. So Yucca will be staying. Okay, Glam is gonna go. You know why Glam is gonna go? Because I decluttered the Glam palette the last time I did an eyeshadow palette declutter. And at the last minute, I got weak and I put it back. But guess what? Guess how many times I've used this palette since I put it back? 0. 0. There is my answer. Now, this is a beautiful palette. There is absolutely nothing wrong with this palette. And there's nothing wrong with almost all of these that I'm going to declutter. This is just for me personally and what I want in my collection and what I will use. But there's nothing wrong with this. This is a beautiful palette. Beautiful, smokier, cool-toned palette. But I just don't use it. I don't use it. So that one is gonna go. Then we have the Biba. Okay, I remember when I got this palette, I remember ordering it from Sephora and being so excited to get it. This was the palette I would hear about all the time when it came to Natasha Denona. This was before she really got into doing all the midi palettes. This is still the larger palette era. And I got this, and again, this is a beautiful palette, but you know what? Actually, these are not really colors that speak to me a lot. Yes, it's neutral, but something about me, and I'm realizing this more and more the longer I do YouTube and I just use makeup, I do not like these kinds of colors right here. These like peachy, orangey kind of shades. That is just not me. The minute I put something like that on my eyes, I want to take it off. I just don't like it on myself. So you know what? Little Biba is gonna go. I used to love it, but again, I couldn't tell you the last time I used it. So Biba is gonna go. And now, okay, I've been thinking about this decision for a few weeks, and I'm not exaggerating. So we have the new gold palette from Natasha Denona and the old gold palette from Natasha Denona. So this is the old one, which this palette is beautiful. It is beautiful. Is it a palette I use all the time? Definitely not. Do I use these like blue, teal looking shades? No, not really. But it's still a beautiful palette. Then we have the new one. You can't get this one anymore. You can get this one. All right, the old one's gonna go. It's beautiful, but I just don't need it. And I need to stop thinking I need to hold on to it because it was this popular palette that you can't get anymore. And you know, if I'm not using it, why am I keeping it? So that's gonna go. And then the gold palette. I'm sure I'm gonna get this question, so I'll just address it now. The new I Need a Warm palette. I have not seen it in person, but I've seen a ton of reviews on it. And they're very confusing because some of them look extremely warm, peachy, orangey shades, like the shades I was just pointing out in the Biba palette that I don't love. And some of them look a little bit more neutral on video, so I don't really know, but I don't think I'm gonna buy the I Need a Warm palette. I just don't think I need it. And this palette, I'll be honest, I have not used this much either, but I do like the shades in here. a lot more than the Original Gold or the Biba or the Glam. And this is also, besides I Need a Warm, this is like her newer palette. So I believe that one can stay. Now, on to some Sigma, Makeup by Mario, and ColourPop. Okay, again, we're gonna start out easy here. The ones I'm keeping, 100%. Makeup by Mario Ethereal Eyes palette. This is one of my favorite palettes of all time. You can't get it anymore, but I don't care. I'm keeping it anyways. This is me in a palette, truly. I love every single shade in here. I think this is just beautiful. I love the mattes in here personally. They're so easy to blend. Very buildable, not like intensely pigmented right off the bat, but they're so easy to work with. The glitter toppers are beautiful. I have a shade in here for like a powder liner. Would never ever declutter that. I will also definitely be keeping the Master Mattes, the neutrals. This and one other palette that I have are my two matte palettes that I just love so much. This formula in this palette reminds me of the matte formula in the Ethereal Eyes palette, because it's, again, it's very buildable. It's very, it's just easy to use. It's in no way difficult. It's just easy. And any matte shade I could ever want is in this palette. So that can stay. Okay, let's talk about ColourPop. So I have 3 ColourPop palettes. I have Going Coconuts, That's Taupe, and Not a Box of Chocolates. I can remember, look at my Going Coconuts palette. It's like all rubbed off. It won't even close all the way anymore. But this, I remember you couldn't get this palette for a while. This was back towards the beginning of my channel, and it is a beautiful palette. I never used this red color. And I think ColourPop, in terms of an affordable eyeshadow formula, or more affordable I should say, is pretty good. But am I going to choose this over those palettes that I kept? No, never. I'm going to choose those every single time. I do love this Cocoa Crush shade in the middle right here, but I have that shade in another palette that I can think of. In fact, this shade is in the I Need a Nude palette from Natasha Denona. And you know, I think it's time. I think it's time to let that go. Then we have That's Taupe. Now, That's Taupe is another beautiful palette, but again, most of these shades are in I Need a Nude or Ethereal Eyes from Makeup by Mario. And I don't know, I'm just not as into ColourPop as I was a few years ago. I just don't gravitate towards it. I don't know. I feel like ColourPop is definitely, I don't know if it's becoming unpopular or it's just they don't release as many products anymore, so you don't hear about it as much. But I don't know. I just haven't been as into it in the last year or so. I also have this one, Not a Box of Chocolates, which is a great palette. Pretty deep for my skin tone. That most of the shades in here are on the deeper side. So like a lot of these shades down here, I've never used. Like I don't think I've ever used that or that. I don't know that I've ever used any of these down here actually. And this is a pretty palette. There's nothing wrong with it. The quality is pretty good, but I could definitely let that go. I'm not going to use that. The Nabla Side by Side palette. This, I want to say I bought this on the Ulta 21 Days of Beauty a few years ago, I think. I don't know. I like this formula, the Nabla formula, but again, these are not, they're not a ton of colors in here that I love. Like this whole row, I don't really like. These two, I won't use, or I would use very, very rarely. I would really only use this top row and maybe these 3 from the second row. I don't love that like bright yellow gold like that. And then I might use this white, but I just, like I said, I'm trying to avoid keeping a ton of palettes that I know I don't like a lot of the shades in them. So that is gonna go. Then we're left with 2 little mini Sigma palettes. This palette, the Spicy palette from Sigma, I am also going to declutter. This one was sent to me in PR, and these are just not my shades. I love the middle one, and I love this one. But like the reds and the orange kind of colors, I'm never going to use. I'm never going to touch those. I do like the 9-pan palettes from Sigma, but I could definitely let that go. I am going to keep this little quad from Sigma because this is the kind of thing that I love. A lighter, like inner corner metallic, a lid metallic, a crease color, and like an outer corner color or a liner color. And I do like the Sigma formula. The Tiramisu palette can stay. Moving along. Okay, we'll start easy this time. Definitely not gonna make the same mistake again. The Urban Decay Naked palette, I just got back and I am so incredibly happy with this palette. This formula, now that they've kind of updated it, is even better. And I love the color story in here. These two dark shades at the end, I would use maybe for like a special look I was doing, maybe for a video or something. But the rest of the shades in here, I would use pretty regularly. And I just love this palette. It's neutral and it makes me happy. So that is going to stay. Also, easy for me, Patrick Ta. If you know me, you know this isn't going anywhere. The Patrick Ta Major Dimension palette, I still love. I still use it. I do not use this shade, this red matte right here, but I use every other shade in here, and I don't. I mean, I would not get rid of this palette. I love Patrick Ta, and I do love his eyeshadow palette formula. My favorite shade, or one of my favorites in this palette, is actually this cream right here, because it's a matte kind of ivory color, but it has like really fine shimmer in it. It's so pretty and unique. I love that one. But I also love his cream shadows. They're amazing, very creamy, but they stay and they set down. They're really great as like eyeshadow bases too. So that will stay. Then we have Major Dimension 3. This is the other matte palette that I was talking about earlier that I love. And you know, anything I would need in terms of a matte eyeshadow is either in this or the Makeup by Mario, the Neutrals palette. This is just perfect. And this matte formula, I think, is pretty comparable to Makeup by Mario's matte formula. I would describe them really the same, but this palette is nice because you get a whole row of cooler shades and a row of warmer shades, and you get a black and a brown cream shadow. But you don't often find palettes where you get truly warm and truly cool shades all in one palette. So that is an easy keep. My least used of the Patrick Ta palettes is definitely this one with the pinks and the rosy colors in it, mainly because it has like this red row right here, which I don't use. I do like all the other colors though. It's mainly like this row here, and I don't reach for pinks every single day. It's not like a common thing for me to use, but I'm a Patrick Ta fan and I keep all of his products. So those will be staying. Sigma. Y'all are gonna be shocked. You're gonna be shocked. I think I'm gonna declutter all of these. Not because they're bad and not because I don't like them, but this is kind of what I'm thinking in my head. Okay, if you told me I had to pick having these or having these, it would be no contest. I would choose these every single time. So for me, for that reason, I just don't think I need to hang on to them. Part of me wants to hang on to this one because it's Disney, and I do love Disney, and Cinderella is my favorite princess. And me and my husband, we're actually about to go to Disney in like 2 weeks. And I love that they did a Cinderella palette. I do, but I'm never gonna pull this out and use it. I'm just not. And I think it's time that I face that reality because I just don't want to keep things that I know I'm not going to use. Now, the Ambiance palette, again, beautiful palette, but very warm. And if I'm choosing a color story like this, of the palettes that I own, I would choose the gold palette from Natasha Denona, the new one that we're keeping. These are just extremely warm. Pretty much all the colors in here, with the exception of like this row right here, but everything else for the most part leans very, very warm. We got the red again that I don't use. And I don't know, it's a little too warm for what I like. And I don't really use it. I did at one point, but I just don't anymore. And then, okay, the Enchanted palette. I wanted this palette for so long, and I do still think that this is a pretty palette. It's one of the more unique color stories in Sigma palettes, and I do think it's nice, don't get me wrong. But again, am I gonna pick this for these light shades right here that I do like all of these and even these I would use, but those shades are in I Need a Nude, or they're in the Patrick Ta Major Dimension palette or the Major Dimension 2, and I'm gonna choose those every single time. So I just don't think I need them. I don't. And then this is their newer one. This is the only one I did not purchase myself. This came to me in PR. And it is a really pretty color story. It really, really is. This is the only one that I feel unsure of because I do like overall this color story, but all right, this is going to be the first maybe. Yeah, this is going to be the first maybe because I don't feel 100% on this one right now. So that is going to be a maybe for now. Moving into my smaller palettes now, which I will just say, something I've noticed about myself in like the last year or so is I gravitate towards small palettes a lot. I don't know why. I love like a quad or even like a 6-pan palette. I just seem to want to gravitate towards that size palette. I don't know why. But okay, let's do easy. One of my other favorites in my collection, the Dior Quint in Nude Dress. I love this. This is the old formula that I have. I've still not tried the new ones. I don't know that I will, to be honest, because I love this one. But this shade right here, I just love so much. This, I don't even know. Do these even have names? I don't think they do. But this shade right here, I love. It's like a perfect, kind of like a rosier taupe metallic, really pretty one and done color or one and done shadow. That is an easy one. Then I have one more from Dior, and this is the soft cashmere color story. And guess what? It's never been used. I don't know if I ever talked about this in a video, but back when Dior was starting to reformulate everything, and when you would go in Ulta or Sephora, a lot of the packaging was mixed. Like they had some of the new stuff, but they still had some of the old stuff like mixed in. And you could tell because the older stuff had the shiny packaging and the new stuff had the matte packaging. I was in an Ulta one day and I was looking at the Dior counter, and there was one palette, there was one quint sitting where the quints were. I guess they hadn't put any of the new stuff out, but there was one sitting there, and it was the older formula. And it was soft cashmere, which is very cool toned, but I mean, it's very pretty. Like, look at that. That is really, really pretty, but I have never used it. I am gonna keep it though, and I wanna use it because I like the Dior formula, or I like the old one at least, and that is a really beautiful palette. So that I will keep. I believe I'm also gonna keep this. This is the Tarte eyeshadow quad. Now this one they sent me, they made this quad for me. I don't remember if this was one that you could get pre-made or not. But anyway, they sent me this, and I do love this actually, which is not the norm. Typically, when I get palettes in PR, I usually don't love them just because I didn't pick them myself, you know? I don't know. But this one, actually, I love all of these shades. And the Tarte eyeshadow formula, if you are not familiar, is so incredibly finely milled, buttery smooth, and their shadows are not flat mattes. They're more of a satin finish. They are so beautiful. Not super pigmented, but just very elegant and just classic. And I do really enjoy this little palette. So that I will keep. Then I have this one from Rare Beauty. This was the Give Yourself Grace palette. And I bought this for a full face of Rare Beauty a few years ago, or I don't know, it's probably been like a year and a half, maybe 2 years. And this was like her newer palette at the time. So I bought it because I wanted to have one of her palettes in the video. And actually this formula is decent. It's pretty good. But again, see these tones right here? Not gonna use it. This glitter right here, not gonna use it. I might use these two, you know, probably not every day, but I might use those two. I would use the purple maybe here and there, but like, and I'm not gonna use these. I will say though, if you happen to really like one of the Rare Beauty eyeshadow palettes, the formulas are actually decent. They're not as good as, you know, Natasha Denona or some of the other shadows that I love and that I'm gonna keep, but they are decent. But I am gonna declutter that. Then I have this little palette from Pat McGrath, which I also have 3 larger Pat McGrath palettes that we'll get to probably towards the end of the video. But okay, I'm torn on this because these are all in fact shades that I would use. And this formula is nice. These don't exist anymore. And am I gonna pull these out and use them? I don't know. So this was from holiday last year and it's Bronze Ecstasy. And there, I mean, the formula on this is very, very nice. I prefer this formula to her Mothership palettes for sure. But I think I can let it go. Honestly, well, I'll talk more about Pat McGrath when we get to the larger palettes that I have, but I think I can declutter that for now. Okay, then I have 3 from Tom Ford. I have one of the originals, Nude Dip, which I think this is probably one they were most well known for. And I found this a long time ago at a cosmetics company store for 75% off. I think I paid like $19 for this. The truth is I don't use the Tom Ford Quads that often, but I do really like all the colors in here. Yeah, Nude Dip's gotta stay. I was thinking maybe I could declutter that one, but I actually don't think. I don't think I want to. Okay, so that one can stay. And then I have, let's see, which one is this? I think this is the cream one. Oh no, this is my other, just of the classic one, which is the Honeymoon palette. This is such a random one for me to really like, but something about this palette I do really like. Like even this maroon color right here. I typically don't go for colors like that on my eyes. I actually like to wear colors like this, but I don't like it like on my eyes typically. I think Honeymoon is gonna stay. I can't explain why. I feel like that's a really random one for me to keep, but I think Honeymoon is gonna stay. And this one I know is gonna stay. This is the Eye Color Quad, the cream formula in Rose Topaz. Oh, I love this one. I love this one. I love all the shades in here. I love this formula. I really love this kind of rosier taupe, I guess is what you would call it. I love that color. I love the topper. I actually really like the Tom Ford cream formula. So that one is definitely staying. Then I have some more little mini palettes. I will definitely be keeping this. This is Victoria Beckham Eye Brick in her signature color story, which is a very Blair palette. I really like this little palette actually. It's so tiny, it's heavy, and I just love Victoria Beckham products. They're so beautiful. but I actually like her eyeshadows. They're not, I'm trying to think of what I could compare them to. They're very smooth. They're a little bit more on the matte side. They're not really that like satiny kind of finish, but they're very nice. And this palette is nice if you like just a very neutral, everyday kind of color story. And it's nice because it's so tiny. And I love that kind of palette. I know it's boring and I know it's neutral, but that is what I like and that is what I use. Now, this one from Nars I am gonna hang on to. I actually just got this recently. This is their Eye Quad in Mojave. So they just recently re-released these. I think they had these before, but that's what they seem to do with eyeshadow. They discontinue them, bring them out again, discontinue them, bring them out again. I don't know why, but I just recently got this. And actually this formula from Nars is even nicer than I remember it being. They're very, very, very creamy kind of metallic colors. And this sparkly like pink right here, I love. But yeah, this formula, very, very nice. These Nars quads now, I really enjoy. So that from Nars, I will definitely keep. And then I have the Nars, the Nars Laguna quad. This was, I don't remember when this came out. This was from a little while ago. I'm gonna declutter this. It's a nice neutral quad, but I have a ton of nice neutral quads. And this one you cannot get anymore. So that one I will declutter. Then I have this one from Give, and this is probably gonna surprise you, but I'm gonna keep this. Yes, it's neutral. Yes, it's 4 very basic mattes. And her shadow formula is not anything super special. But if you want just something that's barely there, not super pigmented, easy to apply, just quick, like transitional type colors, this palette in Simple Kind of Life is actually very nice. At one point, these were on clearance. I actually found this at TJ Maxx, so I hope these aren't going away, but maybe they are. I don't know, but I am actually gonna keep that one. All right, then I do have a Prada what were these called? Durable Multi-Effect eyeshadow. Now, I did not buy this. This was sent to me. I did a little Instagram campaign thing with Prada Beauty a few weeks ago, and they sent me this quad for that video. So I did not buy this. And this is honestly not something I would have bought with my own money because I would not use this shade. Now I would use these 3, but I will never use that. I did use it in my video just to use it. And I actually like how the look came out. I did it in a very Blair way, very neutral way, but I do really enjoy this formula. This is just Luxe, but this shade right here, I love. This one right here, I would keep the palette just for that shade. But actually, I also like these. The middle one is just kind of like a warmer brown, I guess. And then this one is more of like a, I don't know, more of like a reddish brown. But this is really pretty for like a liner color or outer corner, something like that. And I love Prada. I have a fascination with Prada, and I want to keep this for that reason. So Prada quad will be staying. And then we are left with 3 little minis from Natasha Denona. Okay, so I am definitely going to keep Mini Dream for obvious reasons. You can look at it and tell. Of all her minis, this one is my favorite by far because I have everything in here. A transitional shade, outer corner shade, a liner shade, a lid like pop metallic shade, and like a little bit of a deeper taupey one and done kind of shade. So that one will be staying. Then I have the Mini Gold. Does this still exist? Because I had to order this from Natasha Denona's website. Part of me wants to keep this because I do love greens and I actually love this color story, but now I'm wondering, do I have all these shades in the Yucca palette? Okay, so the matte green right here, I guess is a little bit different than these matte greens in here. This palette doesn't have this like taupier color right here. It doesn't really have that either. I guess this one would be the closest thing. I think Mini Gold's gonna have to stay. Because like I said, if I'm going to use like a color shadow, green is my favorite. So that one can stay. Then this is the mini Starlit palette. I'm torn on this one. No, you know what? I'm going to declutter this because the tones kind of remind me of I Need a Nude, but I prefer I Need a Nude. And I know for a fact I'm not a huge fan of this color right here. I don't remember which one this is. I think it's Raya, maybe? Yeah, I think it's Raya. I'm not a huge fan of. So that one I will let go of. Some more mini palettes. All right, so what I was referring to earlier were these little palettes from MAC. These are palettes that I made. This is my more recent one, and I just love this one. Yes, it's very basic, very boring, but I just love it. We have Honey Luster, Brune, Omega, and I think this one is Brulee, I'm pretty sure. But I made this as like a travel quad for me, something that I could take with me, and I can actually use these two in my brows if I needed to. It's just a really good little quad. I also made this one. I'm trying to remember. I know this is Wedge, Espresso, Woodwinked. I think this one's Naked Lunch. I don't remember these two. I should, but I don't. But I would rather keep these than that pre-made MAC palette. So I'm gonna keep those. Okay, this was the palette I was trying to think of earlier. This is the Super Nudes palette from Charlotte Tilbury. This I am gonna keep. This formula in here is very, very, very similar to the formula of those mattes I was talking about in the Beautyverse palette. They are just really like silky, velvety feeling shadows. Very, very unique. They have a satin finish to them, so they're not flat matte, but they're not glittery. And this is just a great little palette to have, so I will keep that. Keeping with Charlotte Tilbury, I have this little quad. This is the Celestial Pearl quad from a few holidays ago. I'm going to declutter this. I got this at the time because I was a little bit more into Charlotte Tilbury then, and I do like these shimmery type of topper colors like this, but am I going to use this for content? No, because you can't get this anymore. And I have so many toppers in these other palettes that I love. I do like the packaging on this one. I wish you would bring this back. The star and the kind of like mother of pearl packaging I think is really pretty, but I will declutter. Pillow Talk quad. Oh my gosh, I want to keep this just because it's Pillow Talk. Yeah, we're gonna keep classic Pillow Talk because when I think of Charlotte Tilbury, obviously I think of Pillow Talk, and that is, I don't know. I don't feel like I can let that go. Then we have Pat McGrath Venusian Sunrise. So this was the quad that came out, I believe, with her powder bronzers, probably about a year ago. And I'm also going to declutter this. I'm just not a huge Pat McGrath eyeshadow fan, and I keep buying her things, and I keep thinking I'm just going to start loving them, and I need to stop because it's just not my thing. I don't know what it is, but I just don't gravitate towards her eyeshadows. I never want to use them, and I'm going to let it go. And then finally we have two from Dior. I am definitely keeping this one. This is the Smokey Essentials palette. This was such an unexpected love for me. I cannot explain why I really like this palette because the color story doesn't necessarily look like something that I would love, but these shades in here are a little bit different for me, but there's something about them that I just really, really like. I can't explain it. I don't know. And the Dior eyeshadow formula is pretty good. It's a little bit on the thicker side. It's not as creamy as like the Tom Ford shadow formula, the cream, or just the originals. I'm trying to think of what it's most similar to. Probably somewhat, well, that makes sense. I was gonna say, you know what? It kind of reminds me of this, but duh, Blair, this is Dior too. The Quince, the shadow formula of this is relatively similar to those. And I can't explain this one. I really don't know, but I really enjoy this and it speaks to me. So that will stay. Now, this one I knew was gonna be hard. First of all, this was the old Dior. This was when Dior, before they rebranded. So this is the new, it's all caps. This is the old Dior. This was a limited edition Backstage palette from 2 years ago, maybe. And it was khaki neutrals. And something very odd happened with this palette because it was there and then it was gone very, very quickly. I don't know why. But I remember I had to kind of search for this in store and it went away really, really quickly on Sephora, I remember. And I don't know why, but I thought that was kind of odd. I will say I don't love every color in here. Like I don't love that one. I don't love this like white shimmery shade, but I do like all the greens. However, I think I can let it go. All right. We'll go with these. This is brand new to me, the Lisa Eldridge eyeshadow palette in Vega. I will definitely be keeping. I was honestly pleasantly surprised by this, not because of the quality. I assumed the quality was going to be good, and it is. It's very, very good. I didn't know if I would love this color story, to be honest, because I don't usually go this cool with eyeshadow, but I used this in my Lisa Eldridge video from a few weeks ago, and I have to say, I was pleasantly surprised by how pretty this was on my eyes. Even like this kind of blue-gray color right here, I wasn't sure about, but actually it looked really, really pretty, and I really enjoyed it. So that one will definitely stay. All right, so we have 3 from YSL. Obviously, I like these because I have 3 of them. This is number 100 Stora Dolls. This is probably the most popular one of all the YSL quads, but I love this formula. This is very, very similar to the Tom Ford cream shadow formula, but these are just good. Like, there's just no other way to say. These are good. The packaging is stunning. Like, look at this quilted packaging. It doesn't feel cheap. Like, YSL really killed it with these. So, Stora Dolls staying. Then we have, this is my newest one, I think. Yeah, so this one is shade 400. I think it's Babylon Roses, maybe. This is my least used of the 3 that I have. I was honestly kind of thinking about decluttering this one, but now that I look at it, I'm like, ugh, maybe not. No, Blair, what are you thinking? You can't declutter that. Like, look at that. Yeah, no, that's staying. Now this last one, this is actually the first one I bought, which is shade 300, and it's also beautiful. It's warmer, obviously, but this is the one that made me want more of them. This one is just on the warmer side. So you have a warmer brown, you have this beautiful like gold, brown, and like a cream color, but these are just, this formula, I'm telling you, if you're in a Sephora and you see these, like, go over and swatch them because they're so nice. Okay, so those are staying. And then we have 2 drugstore palettes here. This is going to be decluttered, the Essence Nothing But Nude. I will say, this is a good neutral palette. Is it like amazing quality? No, but is it pretty good quality for $4? Yes, it is. Essence, I'm not gonna lie, their packaging drives me nuts. I know it's less expensive, but almost all of my Essence products have done this. Like the wording flakes off. Like, it's just not, it doesn't work for me. I don't like that. So that will go. And this is the one I'm torn about, honestly, because these are actually good. From CoverGirl, these shimmering beige, clean, fresh, clean color quad. These are actually pretty nice. I was pleasantly surprised by this formula because I will just be honest and say I do not like most drugstore eyeshadows. I just don't like them. I just don't think most of them are very good, but this one is actually decent. However, am I gonna use it? That is the question. That one's gonna go in the maybes because I don't I don't feel 100% confident on that. So that one's a maybe, and we're on to the last group. All right, actually, we'll do these three by themselves, and then we'll do Pat McGrath last. I have two of these from LA Girl, and these are nice, but I'm going to declutter them. I just, like I said, I'm not a huge fan of drugstore eyeshadow. I just don't think most of them, quality-wise, are anywhere near as good as the ones I'm keeping here. So I will say though, this from LA Girl, one of the other better drugstore formulas that I've tried with this CoverGirl one. These are pretty good, don't get me wrong. But again, I'm trying to cut this down and keep the stuff that I love and I know that I just can't be without. And I can definitely be without these and be okay. But they are good. They're not bad. This is Cowgirl and this is Seduce from LA Girl. And I think these are like $5 or $6, maybe $7, I forget. But I'm going to declutter because I'm not going to keep something that I don't just absolutely need. Then this Milani Gilded Mini Palette. This is decent, but it's very similar in terms of color story to the Super Nudes from Charlotte Tilbury. And of the two, there's no comparison in terms of the quality of the formula. This is that silky smooth, like satiny formula, and these are just basic mattes. But the colors are very similar, but again, I'm not going to use it. I'm also not going to use that shade. I might use that one. I have this thing about orange leaning eyeshadows and I just don't like them on me. So that I will declutter. Finally, I have three larger Pat McGrath palettes. As I said in an earlier clip, I have tried over and over to love Pat McGrath eyeshadows because there's no doubt that they are, I mean, the packaging is beautiful. Obviously they're very expensive. They're pretty luxurious. I do think the quality's kind of gone downhill recently, as a lot of you probably agree or know, but I mean, there's no denying the packaging is heavy. I mean, you could really hurt somebody with this palette. So this is the newer mothership. So the mothership from last year. This tells you how much I use it. I can't even remember the name of it. Sunlit Seduction. Then this was my first one. This is Moonlit Seduction. And this is a lot of people's favorite of all 10 of her big palettes, or her mothership palettes. I know a lot of people love this, but I have just never fallen in love with Pat McGrath eyeshadows. Even the really glitzy, like shimmery ones, and I'm by no means an expert. I don't have any of the earlier palettes, but like this shade here, these duochrome type shades, that's just not my thing. I can appreciate how nice and different they are, and I know a lot of people love these, but for me personally, this is just not my thing. I'm never going to use a shade like that. So, you know, I just don't think I need these. And they were expensive, so I will probably try to resell these, so I'm not going to swatch them anymore. So I don't know. They're just not my favorite. Even the mattes, I find them really hard to work with. I think they're pretty pigmented, but they are very patchy to me. I think they're pretty hard to blend. And I also don't love the choice of matte colors. I prefer the ones in the newer one, but I mean, they're just not super easy to work with. And they just don't, I want to love all the palettes that I have, and I just don't love these. So those are both gonna go. And one final palette. This was what was the name of this? Celestial Nirvana, which, as you can see, has a lot of shades in it that I have never used and would never use. But what's sad about this is there are two shades in here that I love. This shade and this shade. Actually, this whole quad over here I like. But again, am I going to pull this out and use it? No. I will say that I actually preferred the mattes in this palette to the mattes in the mothership palettes. I don't really know why, but the mattes that I have used, I prefer from here as opposed to the motherships. But, you know, am I going to use Turquoise, no. Purples, no. Pink, no. Red, no. Orange, no. Like, there's just no point. There's just no point in keeping it, so that will also go. And that is everything. That is everything. Okay, so I'm gonna count these up because I have no idea how many I had or how many we're getting rid of, but I will count them up. Oh, we have 2 maybes. So I'm thinking if I want to keep something for my declutter, like chopping block video that I'm going to do when I'm finished decluttering everything. I think I'm going to declutter Cool Neutrals from Sigma. Again, not because it's a bad palette, but I just don't see myself pulling that out over everything else that I have and using it. And I'm going to put this CoverGirl Clean Quad in the chopping block. I'm going to use this again and see what I think in that video coming soon. So now I'm going to count them up and I'll be back and give you the numbers. All right, so believe it or not, we have cut my eyeshadow palettes in half, and I haven't successfully done that with any other category, but we are keeping 31 and we are decluttering 34. So almost directly in half. We're decluttering a few more than we're keeping, but I'm really happy with that. I just double checked and went through all of these again just to make sure that I felt good about them, and I do. I'm not sad to see any of these go at all. So I definitely think I did well here. So as always, I am gonna put my palettes I'm keeping away with you, and then that'll be it for this video. Now, we have not done single eyeshadows yet. Those are in a different drawer with mascara and brows and shadow sticks. So I might end up trying to combine that drawer with this drawer since we're getting rid of so much here. But for now, I'm just gonna put the stuff I'm keeping back in the eyeshadow drawer. So we started with 65. We're keeping 31 and decluttering 34.